Hey everybody, welcome back again to Ken Tamplin Vocal Academy, where the proof is in the singing. I'm doing a really interesting series, and the series is called Replacement Singers. Next up, AC/DC, Bon Scott, of course, and Brian Johnson. Before we get started, if you wouldn't mind, please like and subscribe to my channel. That would be really cool. I have a singing course. It's called How to Sing Better Than Anyone Else, where we talk and negotiate how all these singers got to these different vocal places. And you can find it right here at kentamplinvocalacademy.com. I also have a free singing forum over there with about 25,000 singers also negotiating how to get good at singing. So without much further ado, I want to go ahead and just dive right into this because I've got a lot of information I'd like to cover. But I'd like to start off by saying that remember, I've done a couple of these, and on the very first one, I don't want to talk about which singer is better just with their voice. I mean, and by the way, that's conjecture and given over to someone's interpretation. I think that Bon Scott was a very different singer than Brian Johnson. Very different. Some people say no, he's just like they're the same. Really not. And I'm going to discuss that as we go through this. But let's also remember a few other criteria as we go through this to be fair as we're evaluating. First is the original material sung or written, for the original material. Let's do this again. Was the original material written for the original singer compared to the replacement singer? And did the replacement singer had a similar voice type to cover the original material? That's very, very important because we just did one with Sammy Hagar and David Lee Roth, very different singers. Pretty tough for Sammy to sing like David, pretty tough for David to sing like Sammy. Though they were able to pull it off, and I think Sammy just did a phenomenal job as a replacement singer for Van Halen. Now, in this case, there are a lot of similarities, but they're still very similar, different singers. So, I just washed my tongue and I can't do a thing with it today. But I want to also talk a little bit about when Brian Johnson joined AC/DC, he came out of nowhere. So he didn't come from a well-known established band. He came out of nowhere, kind of like, Ripper Owens did, with Judas Priest and so forth. So we're going to cover all this stuff. All these things matter because the other biggest component we're going to talk about too as we go through, if I can remember, is how long did the replacement singer last after replacing the original singer? And what contribution did that singer bring creatively? Did they write new material that went on to project the band to continue to grow? Okay, so let's kind of keep all those things in mind as we're grading someone and judging it. It's not just, I like Bon Scott, he's better. I like Brian Johnson, he's better. Let's take all this into consideration. Let's be fair. And I really want you guys in your comments to share your heart and thoughts with me. It's the only way we can dialogue over this, and please be respectful when you do it. All right, so I'm going to dive in. Oh, before I play this, I'd love to tell you that I have their very best songs and their very best footage, and I try to find more live stuff because I think it's kind of more fair to listen to live stuff. Record stuff's good when that's all I can get, but publishing companies, especially with AC/DC, it's really tough to get them to release stuff, so I had to find footage I was allowed to use and so forth. So I think I did a good job on that, so here we go. Check it out.
I want to tell a story about old no. When I come making love, Rose is steal the show. She ain't exactly pretty. She ain't exactly small. 4, 2, 3, 9, 5, 6. You can say she's got it all.
Cool. All right, now, what do you guys notice right out of the gate? Well, I noticed several things. One, he's ducking a lot of notes because it's live, but that's understandable. 2, his range is nowhere near in the same, stratosphere as Brian Johnson. And he's more of a blues bar singer. His approach isn't just, just like crazy high range stuff. He's got more of a, I don't want to say soulful, but more of a bar room blues singer. That's kind of really more along the lines of what he's like. Now, it makes me wonder, back to the replacement singer part, when Brian Johnson joined the band or got the gig, and I remember supposedly he was singing a lot lower blues stuff too, because there's some articles floating around about him talking about, what his band members thought of him going in and screaming for this AC/DC gig. Did Brian Johnson, when he auditioned for AC/DC, think he was hearing the sound Brian Johnson ended up with? Did you understand what I mean? In other words, did he think that Bon Scott sounded like Brian Johnson sounds right now, right? Yeah, shut me out, yeah, that kind of sound. And that was his interpretation of Bon Scott, and especially his interpretation relative to his own instrument, how he could see himself emulating the sound or footing the bill or stepping into the shoes of Bon Scott. Okay, so as we're going through this, it really makes me wonder. I think he kind of thought that Bon Scott kind of screamed and shouted when Bon Scott's not using anywhere near the force. I want to tell you a story about a woman I know. She ain't exactly pretty, yet she steals the show. And he's got that kind of wiry, whiny, not whiny, but wiry kind of sound. Whereas Brian Johnson has a big, fatter, more girthy kind of sound with more range. Okay, so that's my first observation. Let's continue. He's not like, never had a woman. He's not like killing it. He's never had a woman. Never had a woman like you. Doing all the things you do. Right? He's got more of that kind of approach where Brian Johnson is like balls to the walls kind of, when he sings his stuff, right? Now, another observation is he's zenithed or hit the ceiling of his range, okay? So if you listen, he's kind of just at the max and the top of his range. Well, guess what? Brian Johnson does exactly the same thing when he sings. It has to do with the technique. It has to do with the stricture in the throat. It has to do with forcing the larynx into a raised position. So we cover all this in my singing course. So instead, you go, hey! Like you can go and you can relax the throat to get in and out of different ranges without having to feel like your threshold is stuck at the top of your range here like he's doing. But as a blues street singer, kind of bar singer, that's kind of where most people are at. They sort of just sing at the top of their range, and then that's what they feel the range is, and that's all they get. That is actually not true. I've shown this over and over again, how you can get past that threshold in my singing course and relax the throat to get through the mixed voice, on into head voice, match the tonal qualities of your head voice to get up really high and bring it all the way down in percentages in between. But let's note that Bon Scott and Brian Johnson all both sing at the top of their range with this kind of sound. So that's definitely similarity. And also the kind of distorted sound sounds kind of similar. So I could see why people say, oh, their voices sound the same or they're exactly the same when they're not. Okay, let's continue. What I do at Tamplin Vocal Academy is I say the proof is in the singing, right? Why do I say that? Well, that's because I sing this stuff. I have a whole medley of me, and I sing it more like me, and I sing it more like a Brian Johnson. I don't sing it quite like Bon Scott because I have a bigger sound. I have a lower register. It takes a little bit more effort for me to get up top. I have to negotiate it a little bit better. But you can see even someone like a baritone like myself hear me sing my AC/DC medley. I'll put that in the description. I've also done this with one of my other students, Katie Shearer. We did Whole Lotta Rosie, so I'll put that in the description. And I've done some other AC/DC songs with Kayla Reeves, their TSO singer, and so forth. So I'll put all that and you can see how we did, all right, and see how we stack up. Now, I did this one with my student Sarah Loera. We did it as a duet. It was really fun. But I bring this up too, again, because what I want to say about this is because the interesting thing about Brian Johnson and Bon Scott that Brian Johnson totally nailed is the phrase singing of the band. Now, what's kind of cool is that the instrumentation still got to be AC/DC, so it's really identifiable. Right? So it's and they both, Brian was able to master the art of where Bon left off and sing in that pocket phrase singing of guitar, baby, hit the sound, or whatever. You shake me out, she was a fast machine, she kept the motor clean, she was a big deal, driving down the highway, going to a show. You know, they have very similar phrasing, very similar melodic structures, very similar choral structures, and so forth. So Brian, kudos to him, man. He really stepped up to the plate, coming from nowhere, stepping into the foot of, this kind of shoes, filling in the shoes of this or filling the bill of this. Pretty tough to do that. Gotta love that tooth. And obviously this is a studio recording, they're miming too, so he gets the benefit of more range because you can sit behind the red light and track a lot of different stuff rather than it being actually live. Okay, now, the difference is that Brian Johnson uses what's called a raised laryngeal position. And there's lots of singers that do this, and he does it for the effect of being able to, I like to use the terms like heave up a whole lot of vocal mass in the throat and heaving up his vowel sounds and just pulling up a lot of weight into the sound. So he literally, you're gonna hear like this. So it's a very froggy sound, and we don't really want that sound, to be honest, when we're singing. We actually want to lower right? Because this inhibits range, it locks up the larynx. The larynx can't raise or lower, and it's just kind of stuck in this position. By the way, as a rule of thumb, if that ever happens to you and you feel like you're kind of stuck, you can gently grab the larynx and you can massage it in a downward position as you swallow, like this. Swallow again, and it will start to neutralize into a neutral position, okay? I cover all this kind of stuff in my singing course, but that's a rule of thumb. If you feel like you've been singing and you've locked down, you can actually do this. By the way, you're gonna find a lot of vocal coaches stealing what I say, regurgitating it, and trying to make it sound like their own. I've never heard anybody talk about this stuff. No one's talked about glottal compression until I brought it up. No one's talked about all these different laryngeal positions. So it's funny to watch these other vocal coaches steal my stuff and put it out there as their own. But I'm just trying to you heard it first here, folks, at Ken Tamplin Vocal Academy. Anyway, let's continue. So check out Brian Johnson, raise the laryngeal position. Check it out. So don't you fool around. I'm gonna pull it. Right. Sorry, he's got this raised laryngeal position. But he's also doing something else Bon Scott didn't do. He uses a lot of head voice in his sound, just like I did. He's not always pulling that kind of chest up into the sound. Now, I want you guys to do yourself a favor if you want, especially if you aspiring singers out there and especially aspiring to sing like this. Check out my version in the description of the AC/DC medley that I did. I actually do pull chest up into that sound because I like that sound better. It's a fatter sound. I can get a more harmonic resonance around the distortion. It sounds a little tougher. It's a little more authoritative and more fat in the sound. But to stay truly safe on the sound in a live situation, I wouldn't do what I did on a small 3-minute vocal demonstration on YouTube. I did it to kind of show off. I also did something similar on Painkiller. I'm not going to put that in the description. You can look it up. Where I sing Painkiller in chest voice, where Rob Halford sings the whole song in falsetto head voice or a reinforced falsetto. But I did it. I just happen to like the sound better. But in this case, you can hear him going back and forth between chest and head. But he does reside a lot in his head voice. Bon Scott didn't do that, okay? Very important distinction. Let's continue. Gonna take you down! ducked. See, pull the trigger! Right, he's kind of more of a head voice thing, and you can kind of hear him release to that. Let's continue. Now, you can hear him out of breath. By the way, we all get out of breath. Please don't grade everybody's everything on a couple little videos we pulled off YouTube. That's just not fair to the artist, not fair to me, not fair to you, right? It just happens to be the footage I was able to get cleared. But you can hear him running out of air. And if you notice, I want to back this up because a lot of people really don't understand true diaphragmatic supports. We talk a lot about diaphragmatic support. What does it mean? How important is it? How much do you really need it? How do you get it? And I cover that in my singing course too. You can hear he's not really supporting from all of his abdominal cavity. He's supporting from his chest, kind of in the midsection, a little bit in the diaphragm, predominantly in his chest. At the moment he loses his breath, you can hear the velocity or volume and the weakness, or how he becomes almost anemic in the sound. He becomes very weak in the sound the second he loses support, right? That's how important diaphragmatic support is. So if you're saying, I can't hit the notes or I can't sing louder, because you don't understand the concept. You have to get this concept down and embedded in your physical strength and body to be able to pull this kind of stuff off, or don't ever expect to sing like this. It ain't gonna happen, and it ain't gonna happen safely, and you're not gonna get through more than one song if you do. So listen closely to how much the sound diminishes the minute he loses the breath, how important diaphragmatic support is. Check it out. See, you can hear him, he's just barely struggling, keeping his head above water as he's trying to be able to compensate for the fact that he's lost the breath, okay? And you hear that too, like in, some of even the big concerts, the one in Argentina was awesome, but you listen to that, what's the name, I forget that arena. Gosh, I went to a soccer match there. You think I can remember it. Anyway, the big one in Argentina, that was an awesome show. But you can hear him doing some of that too, not as much as here, but anyway. River Plate, See, he's using that to get the breath back. So when you ever hear singers kind of duck a note, or they'll sing a quick stab, or they'll wait on a phrase or whatever, a lot of times they're just flat out of breath, and they're trying to find a way to keep the ball rolling, so to speak, and get enough strength back in the body to continue to sing. And this is athletics, folks. This is not, please don't think that they just open their mouth to do this. This requires a tremendous amount of body strength. So if you don't think it does, you're crazy. It does, I promise. Okay, I had to add this. All right, so it's not just Bon Scott, it's not just Brian Johnson. I had to bring Axl into the picture. So let's hear what Axl's contribution is to this. Are you guys ready? Here we go. Axl Rose, ladies and gentlemen, Axl. Okay, now I have to have some commentary along the way. Several things. A lot of people have really been hard on Axl, his weight, his endurance, etc. I actually think he did a pretty good job. Really, I really did. I think he did a pretty good job. Now, I want to back this up because I want to make some comments along the way, annotations. First thing is you don't really hear much note value to anything he's singing. It's just kind of distorted, belting, phrasing, distorted singing. Some of it you do hear a little bit. The second thing is that it's a little karaoke to me. It's like Axl walked into a karaoke bar and sang AC/DC, so it didn't have the same AC/DC thing for me. It didn't have the attitude, it didn't have the authenticity. You know, there's a lot of it about it that it didn't do, but he did step into something, and and I know that AC/DC took a lot of guff from a lot of bands saying it was basically, Axl karaoke or AC/DC karaoke. So let's be fair. Let's just do it one more time. Let's give credit where credit's due. A lot of the stuff he's doing is hard to do. The notes are high. He is in his Axl wiring. Yeah. Kind of Axl sort of sound, but he does pull it off. I mean, give him credit, man. Check it out. You can almost hear the notes. Sorry, my thing was on. I said you can almost hear the notes. See what I mean? You kind of like, it's so distorted and it's so, I guess, just overdriven in general that you can't really make out any actual note value. Sorry, I had my mute button on there, so if I made a couple comments where you couldn't hear me, all I said is that you really, once in a while, you could pick out what note he's actually singing, so it makes you think you're hearing the rest of it when you're really not. You're just eventually hearing like one note and then some distorted phrase singing. But again, he's still pulling it out. I mean, he's still pulling out. How many people can walk up and do that? Not very many. And again, in his shape and everything else that's going on. So, but I actually think he did a pretty good job, man. So he's like, right? Just kind of a lot of just distorted sound. All right, so anyway, gang, tell me what you think. I'd love to know what your thoughts and comments. What do you think about Bon Scott? What do you think about Brian Johnson? What do you think about Axl Rose? How did this all work out? Who did it better? You tell me who you think did it better, all right? Thank you so much for joining me, and definitely stick around for my next video.